The stars still carried the echoes of Earth's death scream. The Galactic Council believed their victory absolute. The Sol system had been purged, its worlds turned to dust, its people reduced to whispers in the cosmic wind. Humanity had been a mistake, a dangerous predator too stubborn to submit. But predators don't just vanish. They lurk. They watch. They wait. And when the right moment comes, they strike. Now, entire fleets were vanishing without a trace. Commanders were found with their throats slit in locked rooms. Battlecruisers turned against their own kin, controlled by an unseen hand. The Council's mightiest warlords spoke in hushed voices, their eyes full of terror. Because the humans were back. And this time, they weren't fighting for survival. This time, they were here to burn everything to the ground. The transmission was nothing but static at first, white noise laced with faint echoes of a voice, barely decipherable. Fleet Command dismissed it as a sensor anomaly, another ghost in the data feed. Until the words became clear. They're here. The bridge of the Council dreadnought, Varric's Wrath, fell into absolute silence. Grand Admiral Zithron felt his second heart tighten, his three-clawed hands gripping the control panel as the hollow screen flickered. The feed was from the 6th Imperial Armada, a fleet of 50 warships stationed near the Sathari Nebula. "What is this nonsense?" he growled, mandibles clicking in frustration. "Clarify! Who is they?" The voice on the transmission trembled. "Humans, there." The signal cut. Zithron's scaled brow twitched. He turned to the calm officer. "Re-establish contact." The officer's spindly fingers tapped frantically across the interface. Nothing. No reply. No emergency beacon. No fleet. "They're just gone," the officer whispered. Zithron snarled. His fangs gleamed under the dim tactical lights. The thought was impossible. Humans were extinct. They had been exterminated. Their home system burned, salted, erased. This was an illusion. A trick. A malfunction. It had to be. "Admiral." Another officer hesitated. "This isn't the only report. There have been other disappearances. First, just cargo ships' outposts. Then an entire sector relay. Now fleets." Zithron froze. He knew the unspoken truth. Something was hunting them. The heavy doors at the back of the bridge slid open with a hiss. A figure strode inside, Fleet Marshal Drogan, second in command of the entire Galactic Council's War Division. His chitinous armor glowed under the red alert lights, his four insectoid eyes narrowing. "Explain," Drogan demanded, voice cold as deep space. Zithron swallowed his frustration. "We have a developing situation. The 6th Armada has vanished. Last transmission." He motioned to replay it. The bridge was silent as the message played again. "They're here." Drogan exhaled sharply through his mandibles. "What do we know?" "Minimal. No distress calls, no wreckage. Just silence." The fleet marshal's claws flexed against the steel railing. "Humans?" Zithron laughed, the sound bitter and strained. "Ridiculous. The humans are dead. Then who's killing us?" The question hung in the air. A new transmission blinked on the central holoscreen. Encrypted. No traceable source. Zithron and Drogan exchanged looks. The comm officer hesitated. "Put it through," Drogan ordered. A garbled distortion filled the bridge, an eerie pulse like a dying heartbeat. Then a voice. Deep. Hollow. Human. "You should have finished the job." Zithron's blood ran cold. The lights on the bridge flickered. Warning sirens blared. The controls shut down. Every weapon, every system, every failsafe, dead. A hacking. A complete takeover. "Shut it off!" Zithron barked. "I can't!" The officer's hands flew across the controls. "Something's overriding the ship's interior lights flooded with crimson, emergency locks sealing every bulkhead. The oxygen levels fluctuated. Gravity dipped. Then the dreadnought's own weapons came online. "What's happening?" Drogan hissed. "They've taken control." the officer gasped. Outside, Varric's wrath rotated, its colossal railguns locking onto Allied warships. No, 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 no! A single shot fired. A plasma round ripped through the hull of the Tremarch's blade, a Council battlecruiser stationed alongside them. The bridge was swallowed in gasps and screams as the Council's fleet turned against itself. They're using our own ships against us! Zithron watched in horror as one by one, the Council's strongest war vessels fired upon their own brethren. Not a single enemy vessel in sight. This wasn't a battle. It was a slaughter. And the humans never even showed their faces. Drogon's voice came as a whisper, his mandibles barely moving. This is what they do. Zithron trembled. This was the new human war. No armies. No fleets. No declarations. Just the cold, calculated erasure of an empire. A new message appeared on the holoscreen, bright and simple, piercing through the chaos like a blade to the throat. Your extermination begins now. Back at Galactic Command, High Chancellor Varric sat in his golden throne, his bloated, amphibian body quivering with barely concealed rage. This is an insult! He spat. His armored appendages crushed the delicate arms of his seat. An attack on the very foundation of our rule! An attack? Murmured General Shurik, a reptilian warrior from the Drak Dominion. His scaled fists trembled against the war table. They are not attacking. They are executing us. Then we eradicate them again. The Chancellor sneered. Shurik's eyes darkened. We did not eradicate them the first time. We merely sent them into the void. The room grew still. Then we wiped them out for good. Varric snarled. Summon the fleets. We will purge them. A bitter laugh rang from the shadows. A low-ranking officer, his skin pale and shaking, lifted hollow eyes to the Chancellor. Summon the fleets? He whispered. The room fell silent. The officer's breath hitched. My lord, we no longer have fleets. Chancellor Varric stiffened. What? The officer's voice cracked. They're gone, my lord. Varric's massive form tensed. Gone? The officer swallowed. The war fleets you summoned. All of them. They left hyperjump space. A pause. And they never arrived. The chamber filled with an unnatural stillness. Varric's skin darkened, his nostrils flaring. How many? The officer hesitated. His voice was barely above a whisper. All of them. A shiver passed through the room. The greatest military force in the galaxy, hundreds of war fleets, thousands of ships, millions of warriors, was simply gone. No distress signals. No wreckage. No survivors. Varric's blood ran cold. Because deep in the void, a ghost was watching. Waiting. And the hunt was only beginning. The chamber was silent. Not the silence of peace, but the choking, suffocating quiet of impending doom. High Chancellor Varric sat motionless, his massive, amphibious form sinking deeper into his throne. His 4 bulbous eyes remained fixed on the trembling officer before him. Say it again, Varric whispered, his voice a low growl. The officer swallowed hard. The fleets, my lord. Every last one. Gone. The words felt like a death sentence. The assembled warlords and admirals exchanged uneasy glances. Some shifted in their seats, their mandibles clicking, their scaled hands twitching. No one dared to speak. General Shurik broke the silence first. How does an entire war fleet vanish? His reptilian voice was raw, his knuckles white against the war table. This is not an accident. No, Varric said, his voice barely above a whisper. This is war. A new transmission flickered onto the holoscreen. No origin. No encryption. Just a single, pulsing message. We are here. The words sent a cold ripple through the room. A council technician frantically tried to shut it down, but the screen would not change. It pulsed, over and over. Then a second message appeared. Run! The lights flickered. A deep, reverberating hum filled the chamber, a vibration so unnatural it made their bones ache. The technicians scrambled, desperate to trace the signal, to shut it off, to do something, but the moment their fingers touched the controls, the hollow screen changed again. The room filled with screams. It was live footage. Not from the Council's systems. Not from any known military feed. It was a direct transmission from Luthor Prime, the heart of their empire. A place they had deemed impenetrable. And it was burning. The feed showed devastation. The planet's sky was red, thick with choking black smoke as flaming wreckage plummeted from orbit. The great spires of the capital were collapsing, one by one. The mighty planetary defense grid, the most sophisticated in the galaxy, was turning inward, targeting its own cities, raining fire upon the billions who had once believed themselves untouchable. They had expected an attack. They had dared humanity to come. They had not expected to watch their own fortress world tear itself apart from the inside. The council chamber erupted into chaos. Admirals screamed for status reports. Officers scrambled for emergency commands, only to find the system no longer obeyed them. Ships were launching, but not under council control. The most advanced war machines in the known universe had been hijacked, puppeteered by invisible hands. Fleet Marshal Drogon bared his fangs. "How?" he roared. "How are they doing this?" A new voice cut through the chaos. "You built your empire on war." The chamber froze. "You prided yourselves on domination. You slaughtered those who would not kneel." The voice was calm, cold, surgical. "And now you face the one enemy that does not kneel. That does not forget. That does not forgive." Varric's throat tightened. "Who are you?" His voice lacked its usual authority. There was no hesitation. "I am the ghost of Terra." The transmission cut. The power in the chamber died. For a moment, there was nothing but pure darkness. Then the screaming began. The emergency lights flickered back on, but it did nothing to calm the terror. Every control panel was dead. Every personal communicator jammed. A terrifying realization set in: they were trapped. Varric rose slowly, his mind racing. His empire, the pinnacle of galactic civilization, was being dismantled from within. No fleets were on their way. No reinforcements could be summoned. The humans were inside the system. And now, they were inside the Council's last stronghold. A deafening explosion rocked the chamber, sending the warlords sprawling. Smoke and fire flooded through the doors as the outer defenses collapsed. A squad of council guards rushed in, weapons raised. "Chancellor! The perimeter has been breached!" Drogon grabbed a fallen officer and snarled into his face. "How many? How many of them are here?" The guard trembled. We don't know." A whisper passed through the room. "How don't you know?" "Because we can't see them." The words sent ice down their spines. Drogon shoved the guard aside, his mandibles twitching with rage. "Arm yourselves!" he barked. "Seal the doors! Prepare the last battalion!" Shurik turned toward Varric. "We must evacuate. If the humans have made it inside." "Evacuate where?" Varric growled. "They own the void now." A voice echoed through the chamber, but it did not come from the council members. "We told you to run." The floor erupted. A hidden explosive detonated beneath the war table, sending debris and bodies flying. Varric slammed against the wall, his vision blurring as the smoke swallowed the chamber. His ears rang with the shriek of collapsing steel. Silhouettes moved through the haze. They were here. Drogon roared, drawing his plasma blade as he charged toward the closest figure. His movements were lightning fast, his warrior instincts honed through centuries of combat. It did not matter. The figure sidestepped, impossibly quick, and in a single motion, plunged a monomolecular blade through Drogon's chest. The fleet marshal gasped, his second heart severed in a blink. His blade fell from his hand, clattering uselessly to the floor. The human twisted the knife deeper. "You should have finished the job," Revenant whispered. Drogon collapsed. Panic consumed the council chamber. Some warlords tried to fight. Some tried to run. It made no difference. The Legion had come. The battle lasted minutes. The Council's finest warriors, generals, admirals, strategists of 1,000 wars, fell one by one. The air reeked of scorched flesh, shattered bone, and pure, unfiltered terror. Varric lay on his back, coughing up dark, bubbling ichor. His limbs twitched. His body, once the most powerful in the galaxy, now broken and useless. Through the smoke, Revenant stepped forward. His armor was matte black, his visor reflecting the inferno around him. He crouched beside Varric, studying him like a scientist examining an extinct species. The Chancellor coughed. You could have had peace." Revenant's voice was cold as the void. Peace was never an option. He drove his blade into Varric's throat. As the Chancellor's body spasmed in its final moments, the last surviving officer of the Galactic Council screamed into the darkness. "Please! Just tell me why!" Revenant turned, his silhouette framed by the fires of annihilation. "Because you started this war." His voice was calm. "And now we're ending it." The fires of the council chamber were still smoldering, casting twisted shadows across the broken bodies of warlords and admirals who had once ruled the galaxy. The weight of silence pressed heavy, broken only by the sharp, metallic steps of the last surviving members of the Galactic Council as they stumbled through the ruins. The air was thick with the scent of death, scorched circuits, and something far worse, fear. Shurik coughed, blood dripping from his split mandibles as he pressed himself against the shattered remains of the war table. His reptilian eyes darted between the flickering emergency lights, searching, desperate. They had sealed the chamber doors. They had activated every failsafe. And none of it had mattered. The humans hadn't stormed the fortress. They had walked through it like ghosts. A warlord staggered beside him, clutching at his cauterized wound. How did this happen?" His voice was barely a whisper, thick with disbelief. "They had no fleets. No armies. No worlds left." Shurik turned his head slowly, his breath coming in ragged gasps. "You still don't understand, do you?" The warlord's bulbous eyes flickered with panic. "Understand what?" Shurik swallowed hard. "We never understood humans. We thought of them as another species, one to conquer, to control, to erase." He exhaled shakily. "But they aren't like us. They don't fight like us. And they don't stop like us." The warlord shook his head. "We ended them. We watched their planet burn." Shurik's eyes darkened. "Then tell me, why are we the ones running?" A metallic clink echoed through the ruins. A sound like a blade sliding across steel. Both aliens froze. A shadow moved in the smoke. Shurik's scales crawled with instinctive terror. He gritted his fangs, forcing himself to stand despite the screaming pain in his ribs. "Show yourself!" Silence. Then a voice, low, deliberate, human. "You sound afraid." The warlord bolted. He barely made it 3 steps before the shadow moved with impossible speed. A flash of cold silver, a quiet gasp, then a wet, sickening sound as the warlord's throat was opened cleanly from side to side. He collapsed without a sound. Shurik did not move. Did not breathe. The shadow stepped forward, the crimson glow of the emergency lights casting its armored form in flickering contrast. His armor was black as the void, his movements silent as death itself. A human. Not an ordinary one. The Revenant. Shurik's throat dried. His species had a word for creatures like this. Beasts that stalked the dark corners of the universe. Monsters that did not fight wars but hunted civilizations. "You should run," Revenant said. Shurik clenched his fists. "You think this is over?" He spat blood onto the floor. "The Council may be dead, but the Empire lives. Even if you kill me, more will come." Revenant tilted his head slightly, as if considering. "No. They won't." Shurik laughed bitterly. "You think you can erase an empire?" Revenant's voice did not change. "We already did." Shurik's stomach turned to ice. Revenant raised a small, sleek datapad. With a flick of his fingers, a hollow display ignited in the air between them. Shurik stopped breathing. Dozens of burning worlds spun before his eyes. Council colonies, fortress moons, industrial planets, all engulfed in flames, all reduced to ruin. The mighty war fleets of the Empire drifting lifelessly, their crews gutted, their command systems compromised beyond recovery. You're lying, Shurik whispered. Revenant said nothing. The display shifted, showing Luthor Prime, the heart of the Council's rule. The planet's surface was cracking apart, boiling into ruin, the once great spires of their civilization swallowed by the tectonic collapse. Shurik's knees buckled. His chest heaved as he tried to force the truth away, to reject what he was seeing. No, it's not possible. Revenant crouched before him, tilting his head slightly, watching Shurik as if he were something less than an insect. We let you believe you won, he murmured. We let you think Earth was gone. We let you rest in your arrogance, believing we had been wiped out. Shurik trembled. Revenant's voice was ice. We've been watching, learning, waiting. We didn't just want victory. His visor glowed faintly under the dim red lights. We wanted you to suffer. Shurik's breath hitched. You never understood war. Revenant continued, his voice unreadable. You think war is fought with fleets, with armies, with governments and treaties. You think war is about power. Revenant leaned in. You never learned what war means to us. The hollow display shifted one final time. Shurik's entire species' homeworld filled the screen. The cities were dark, lifeless. The biosphere fading, the oceans evaporating into nothingness. The screen displayed a single timestamp, the next 20 minutes. Shurik choked. You wouldn't. We would, Revenant said. The transmission cut. For the first time in his life, Shurik wept. Revenant stood. He did not draw his weapon. There was no need. You should have finished the job, he said one last time. Shurik did not move. Revenant turned and walked away, his form fading back into the smoke, into the chaos, into the legend that would haunt the stars forever. Minutes later, the homeworld of the Drac Dominion burned. And with it, the last remnant of the Galactic Council vanished into history. The ghosts of humanity had made sure of it. The stars above the smoldering ruins of Luthor Prime flickered, distorted by the waves of heat rising from the dying world. The once mighty capital of the Galactic Council, a fortress of absolute dominion, now lay in silence, its towering citadels shattered, its streets littered with the remains of its rulers. The sky, once teeming with council warships, was now a graveyard, their twisted hulks drifting through the void, cold and lifeless. The transmission spread like a virus across every remaining channel, infiltrating encrypted frequencies, slipping past the final defenses of an empire that thought itself untouchable. This is not a surrender. This is not a negotiation. This is justice. The voice was human, deep, deliberate, emotionless. The remnants of the council, scattered across 1,000 worlds, heard it. The officers and warlords still clinging to their failing fleets heard it. The surviving planets, watching the fall of their rulers in helpless horror, heard it. You exterminated us. You burned our world. You buried us in silence. A pause. The weight of the words pressed down like gravity. And still, we returned. On the bridge of the last functioning council flagship, Supreme Admiral Zakari stood motionless, his hands clenched behind his back. His exoskeletal frame, once draped in the ornate gold of absolute authority, was streaked with soot, his ceremonial armor dented from battle. His second heart beat too fast, a rhythm of fear that he refused to acknowledge. The officers around him waited for orders, their gazes flickering between the Admiral and the hollow feed playing across the main viewport. The image of Luthor Prime's destruction, the final death throes of their empire, burned into their vision. Your fleets are gone. Your worlds are burning. Your war is over. Zakari exhaled slowly. There had to be something left. A countermeasure. A contingency. The council did not fall. It could not fall. Communications, he barked, his voice cracking with unfamiliar uncertainty. Send out a priority distress call. Any remaining fleets, Any system still under our control. The comm officer's hands moved with shaky efficiency across the interface. A moment passed. Then another. His fingers froze. The officer turned, his eyes wide. Sir, we have no fleet left. The bridge went silent. Zakari's breath turned to stone in his chest. That's impossible. The officer swallowed. Every signal, every outpost, every warship, every fleet, they're just gone. Zakari turned to the tactical display, his gaze flicking between the blinking red alerts. He refused to believe it. But the data was merciless. No reinforcements. No safe harbors. No escape. The humans had not just destroyed the Council's forces. They had erased them. A new transmission overrode their display. The officers flinched as the screen flashed black and red, displaying a single symbol. The Earth insignia, long thought dead, resurrected like a specter from the ashes of history. A shadow moved across the viewport. A single ship. Not a fleet, not an armada, but one vessel, dark as a starless void, moving through the wreckage of the Council's might without hesitation. Zakari's mandibles tightened. Who commands that ship? His words came slow, heavy. The hollow screen flickered. A new face appeared, shrouded in the dim glow of his visor. I do. Revenant. The bridge crew stiffened, their fear palpable. His presence alone was a declaration, one far more final than words. Zakari felt his throat tighten, his mind racing for options. You can't destroy us all, he said, voice steadier than he felt. There are still Council colonies, still remnants of our rule. We can rebuild. Revenant's head tilted slightly, the faintest trace of amusement in his voice. You still don't understand. The hollow screen shifted, displaying a real-time feed of a distant world. Zakari's blood ran cold. It was Velthor 9, the last great stronghold of the Council. And it was falling. Explosions erupted across its surface, cities engulfed in fire, planetary defenses crumbling in a silent ballet of destruction. There were no human ships in orbit. Zakari's mind raced. How? You think war is fought in battles? Revenant said, his voice almost casual. You think it's about the strength of fleets, the power of armies? The screen flickered. More planets. More destruction. Not by overwhelming force. By precision. We didn't come to fight a war. Revenant continued. We came to undo you. The tactical interface on the bridge died. The emergency lights flickered. A new alert blared through the speakers. System failure. Command lockout engaged. The ship's crew scrambled in panic, hands flying over control panels that no longer obeyed. Zakari took an instinctive step back. They weren't just being attacked. The ship itself was being ripped away from them. You built an empire on control, Revenant said. You ruled by fear, by suppression, by bending the weak under your boot. The bridge doors sealed shut, bulkheads locking with finality. You thought you were invincible. Untouchable. The lights dimmed. You never considered what would happen if you fought an enemy that doesn't care about power. The oxygen began to vent. Revenant's voice did not rise. It did not grow cold. It remained even, steady, certain. We don't want to rule. Zakari felt his knees weaken. We don't want to replace you. He gasped as the pressure dropped, his body struggling for air. We just want you gone. The last thing he saw was the Earth insignia burning bright on the hollow screen. Then nothing. The final Council warship went dark, drifting silently into the endless void. The transmission reached the farthest corners of the galaxy. The war is over. The Council is no more. Humanity has no home. But we are everywhere. And we never forget. In the shadows of the universe, the last survivors of the fallen empire listened. And they understood. The ghosts of Terra would never be seen. But they would always be watching. The stars no longer belonged to the Galactic Council. The empire that had ruled for millennia, the civilization that had once bent the universe to its will, was gone. There was no grand declaration, no peace treaty, no surviving leaders to beg for mercy. There was only silence, the vast, empty void where the greatest power in the galaxy had once stood. The last message had already spread across the known systems, whispered through broken transmissions, intercepted by those who still dared to listen. The war is over. No one celebrated. No one dared. Across the surviving worlds, the remnants of the Council's influence remained, governors stranded without a ruling body, outposts abandoned in the wake of an enemy that did not conquer but simply eliminated. They had expected a fleet, a new government to replace the old. None came. There were no occupation forces, no human banners raised over fallen capitals. The conquerors had simply vanished, leaving only wreckage, echoes of destruction, and the lingering, unbearable fear of their return. On a remote world deep in the outer reaches, a council warlord sat in the ruins of his stronghold. The once pristine halls, lined with banners of authority, were now shattered, the walls cracked from orbital bombardment. His last guards had fled. His allies had fallen silent. There was no one left to call for aid. He clenched his claws, staring at the emergency beacon on his desk. He had sent out a distress call nearly an hour ago. There had been no response. They were listening. They were always listening. His breathing was slow, controlled, but his hands trembled. He knew what would come next. He had heard the stories, the last transmissions from his peers. First, the systems would shut down. The alarms would become useless. The doors, once meant to keep enemies out, would suddenly refuse to open. The lights would flicker. And then, a whisper in the dark. A slow, methodical footstep. And a voice. "You should have finished the job." His mouth went dry. He turned sharply, claws flexing, but he was alone. The room was empty, or it should have been. His mind screamed at him to run, but there was nowhere to go. The main display on his console flickered to life. He did not activate it. The screen showed his own face. Not a reflection. A recording. He watched, heart hammering, as the footage played back moments of his own war councils, his own voice ordering the extermination of humanity. He had given the command himself. He had laughed as the flames swallowed their world. The playback ended. The screen changed. His homeworld. Still intact. Still untouched. For now. A single timer appeared beneath it, counting down. His stomach lurched. No. No, no. His claws raced over the console, but he had no control. The system did not respond. The connection had been severed. His vision blurred with panic as he reached for the emergency override, but the lights in the room dimmed. His body seized. He felt them watching. "What do you want?" His voice cracked. "What do you want from me?" A whisper. "You already know." The timer on the screen hit 0. The warlord choked as the feed shifted, now displaying a real-time view of his homeworld. The planet's orbital defenses were dead, its fleets disabled, its last remaining leaders helplessly watching the sky. Then, the first detonation. Cities vanished in blinding flashes, swallowed by perfectly placed charges. Communication ceased. The planet's crust cracked like shattered glass, oceans boiled away as the bombs burrowed deep into the core. He screamed, but there was no one left to hear. The screen turned black. One last message appeared. "Your kind should have left us alone." The display died. The room was silent. He was alone. A single bullet tore through his skull. No sound. No struggle. Just an execution. The war was over. The ghosts of Terra had finished what was started. Across the galaxy, the last remnants of the Council fell without a trace. Their leaders died in silence, their planets burned without warning. It was not war. It was justice. And then, like shadows vanishing at dawn, humanity disappeared. No ships remained. No bases were found. No settlements rose from the ruins. They had come for vengeance, not conquest. And they had won. The surviving species whispered in terror, never sure if the humans were truly gone or if they were simply waiting. Waiting for the next empire foolish enough to challenge them. Waiting for the next war. Waiting to hunt again.